Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
There was a blizzard outside, the roads were snowed in, and I could not see a thing. The paramedic of the emergency team, a nice-looking woman in her 30s, just arrived from another call, shook off the snow from her jacket, and sat down tiredly. The day was difficult and nerve-wracking, and the patients were all capricious. The woman wanted only one thing, to rest a little, to warm up and drink hot tea. But as soon as she turned on the kettle, she was greeted by the nurse on duty. "Kathy, we have another call. Rose 37, apartment 21. 6-year-old boy, high fever, cough, runny nose." Grandmother called and said they couldn't get to the doctor by themselves. She cried and begged me to come. The doctor sighed wearily and answered, "Thank you, Betty. I understand. We're on our way. Children's fever is a dangerous thing, and we can't wait. Start the car. Vasia, I'll be right out," she commanded the chauffeur. Kathy stepped into an ordinary, shabby entranceway of a house apartment building. Even by the old front door, it was clear that the people living here are not rich. The doctor pressed the bell, then knocked and waited patiently. At last, shuffling footsteps were heard. The door was opened by a very elderly woman, holding a stick and limping badly on one leg. When she saw the doctor with the medical case, she let her in and began to tell her what had happened. "Hello. Come in, please. Thank God we made it, and there was such a snowstorm. I was getting worried. Ben is getting worse and worse. He's burning up. He has been coughing a little bit for a week, and I give him some hot milk or steamed his feet. And last night he got really sick. His temperature rose, and now it is still not going down." Kathy went into the bedroom. The furnishings were poor, old, yellowed and tattered wallpaper, a wooden floor, and rickety chairs. That was the whole interior. On an old couch lay a child, covered up to his neck. The boy was very thin and very red, but very pretty, with huge blue eyes and a slightly upturned nose, and curly blonde hair. The first thing the doctor did was to open the baby, take his temperature, look at his throat, and talk to him at the same time. "Hi, baby. My name is Kathy, and I'm going to listen to you with a real phonendoscope. You know what that is? And you go ahead and slowly inhale and exhale. That's it. Good boy. What's your name, baby?" He answered quietly. "I'm Ben. I'm 7 years old. What are you going to do for me? If I get an injection, I won't give it to you. I'm very afraid of them." The doctor smiled and began to explain to her grandmother. "Okay, the baby has acute bronchitis. I'm going to give him a shot of antipyretics, and his fever will go down quickly. And I'll write him a prescription for antibiotics, cough medicine, and vitamins. But you still tell the parents that it is better to take the boy to a pediatrician for consultation and tests, just in case." Very hard breathing. Grandma sighed and nodded her head. "Now, I'll go get my glasses in the other room." And Ben sadly added, "And I don't have a father. My grandmother says he died, and my mother disappeared a long time ago. Besides Grandma, I have no one at all." Kathy shook her head. She was even annoyed. God does not give children to some, and others leave them, like cuckoos. How unfair life is. Poor little fellow, it's a hard life for him. She began to put the medicine into the syringe, and Ben suddenly cried in fright. Then the woman, to distract him, said, "Let's play a game of riddles, Ben. Listen to this. He's a master drawer, but he's not an artist. He has no teeth, and he can bite. Who is he? Can you guess?" Ben immediately stopped crying and began to think Kathy managed to get the shot, quickly and without pain. She laughed. She knew the boy would never guess it. After all, only she and one other person knew this riddle. That's all. Suddenly Grandma shouted, "And I know it's Frost, right?" Ben clapped his hands and said, "Here, my grandmother knows everything. Make more riddles. I love this game." Kathy was surprised and remembered another riddle, which she also made up with one person in a distant childhood. "Then listen to this. You can't hold her in your hands, even if you clench your fist. She won't look back. She won't even leave a trace." Well, you can't guess that one. Only I know the answer. But here too, Granny surprised me. "We can guess, can't we, grandson? It's water. Well, did you get it? Kathy was dumbfounded. This could not be. After all, only 2 people know these riddles. She and her childhood friend. She couldn't stand it and decided to ask. I'm sorry, this may seem funny and ridiculous, but how do you know the answer? These riddles are not in any book. The thing is, it was me and my friend as a child who came up with them myself. The elderly woman replied. I recently went to a healer with my ailments. He lives in the woods outside of town, and he entertained me in the meantime. If you want, I'll give you the address. Maybe he's a friend of yours. It's not hard for me. After getting the address I was looking for from my grandmother and making sure Ben's temperature began to drop, Kathy bid them a friendly farewell and went out for some air. Her head was spinning and memories of childhood came flooding back. The woman told the chauffeur to drive, and she herself immersed herself in a distant childhood. Kathy grew up in a small village in a poor, unfortunate family. Her mother, Clara, worked as a nurse in a nurse's station. She was a woman who was quiet, kind, and very reserved, and there was a reason for that. Her father had given them both such drunken debauches as to make them both stutter. William worked as a watchman and was very fond of drinking. He was a chronic alcoholic, drunk out of his mind, and no one, wife or daughter, was safe from him. He cursed and foul-mouthed, or he could even grab a knife. He screamed like a lunatic. I'll show you who's boss. You're used to sitting on my neck, dangling your feet. Come here, you little brat. Have you done your homework? I'm going to check your diary. I'll kick your ass. It didn't matter that Kathy was a straight A student and had never had a failing grade. She would still be at fault. The drunken father would find something to pick on. At such moments, Clara would grab her daughter and they would run to her neighbor, Grandpa Ethan. He always pitied and welcomed them. He lived with his grandson, Tim, raising him alone, since the boy's parents had crashed in an accident. Kathy cried and asked her mother 100 times to leave her father. She literally hated him. Mommy, I'm scared of him. Let's get away from Daddy. He's mean. He beats us and doesn't like us. Why do you live with him? Clara was also crying, cradling her daughter in her arms and trying to comfort her. Don't talk about your father like that. It's not nice. William wasn't always like that. I remember him being different, kind, and affectionate. He's just going through a hard time. He's sick, and that's why he's angry. That's all right. I'll talk to him tomorrow when he's drunk, for he promised me he would never drink again. Surprisingly, in the morning, my father was unrecognizable. He repented and begged forgiveness and swore he would never do it again. But after a couple of days, everything happened again and again. Because Kathy spent so much more time at Grandpa Ethan's house than she did at home, she was very friendly with Tim from a young age. They were thick as thieves. The boy loved to read and fantasize and make things up. He and Kathy even invented their own language. It was more fun that way. And Tim adored riddles. He invented them on the fly, in rhyme, and so harmoniously. They went to school together. They sat at the same desk. Many classmates thought they were brother and sister. But as they approached adulthood, everything changed. Kathy, from a small, plump, snub-nosed girl, turned into a stately, tall, long-legged beauty, and Tim assiduously exercised in the yard on horizontal bars and had a pumped torso. He now looked at Kathy in a completely different way. The teenager was complimenting her and shyly saying that he liked her a lot. She remembered their first kiss for the rest of her life. Tim was just seeing off the whole village to the army. They went for a walk in the summer gazebo with songs and dancing. In the midst of the fun, the boy suddenly whispered to the girl, "Let's run away from everyone. To our favorite place, by the river. It's so nice there at night. Are you coming with me?" Kathy's heart beat faster. Tim was everything to her, a friend, a girlfriend, the closest person, and now the one she loved. They kissed passionately on the beach under a sprawling willow tree, and the boy whispered to her, "Kathy, sweetheart, I love you so much. Will you wait for me? I'll write you letters. How beautiful you are." The girl clung trustingly to him and cried, "Tim, how can I do without you? We're always and everywhere together. I don't want you to go away. I miss you already. I'll wait for you. I'll wait for you." They said goodbye for 2 years, but it turned out to be a lifetime. At first, Tim did write often, and Kathy waited with bated breath for every word from him, and she read the letters to tears. But life in their family was still unbearable. The girl was so fed up with everything that she decided to go to the city to study medicine, like her mother. She got in right away. Student life and the big city overwhelmed her with its pressure and whirlwind, and she and Tim stopped writing to each other altogether. After medical school, Kathy met Nick. He was 10 years older than her, had his own small business, and seemed such a reliable and confident man. A relationship started between them, and soon the couple got married. At first, it was like all the others, the honeymoon, the reverent attitude towards each other. But over the years, it all slowly faded away. Her husband accused Kathy of being infertile and of not being able to get pregnant. She blamed herself for everything. She did not even get herself tested. She had fallen into an ice hole in her youth and caught a very cold in the female sense. Her mother treated her herself, but then the doctors found complications and suggested that this could affect the fertility function in the future. Nick didn't seem to drink or abuse her, but he had been acting very strangely in recent years. He could not come home at night, often went on business trips, but for some reason he did not bring money from there. Told her that there were problems at work, difficulties had arisen. The woman repeatedly told colleagues that seemed to have seen her husband with some girl in a restaurant or in an embrace, but she did not believe it. Or rather, she did not want to believe it. And she consoled herself. No, Nick is not like that. Yes, he's not perfect, and their relationship is getting colder and colder. But it's all temporary. He's having difficulties in his business, and he's never talked about divorce. Her husband's work will be fine, and the weather in the family will warm up. We just have to be patient. But one night, when she was taking the bus home late at night, the bus was stuck in traffic for a long time. Kathy looked out the window out of boredom, and suddenly she was stunned. She saw her husband. He was walking on the arm of a young, fashionably dressed woman and was pushing a stroller in front of him. Kathy even felt sick. She wanted to jump out of the bus and shout. How could that be? Nick? Who's that? What about me? Tears were covering her eyes, and the woman could hardly see anything in front of her. That night had turned her whole life upside down. Kathy knew that if her husband had a baby on the side, it meant it was serious, and she would never give birth to him. She was sure it was the end, and doomed to wait for her husband to come home. Nick arrived, as usual, very late, and was greatly surprised to find his wife awake and waiting for him in the living room. Kathy sighed frantically and began an uncomfortable conversation. Nick, I know all about you and the woman you live with and your child together. I've seen you recently. I'm not going to keep you. I know you're sterile, and there's nothing to hide. So go away. We better get a divorce. One thing I don't understand is why did you spend so much time lying to me? Why didn't you just tell me everything? It's so disgusting, Nick. The husband didn't try to wriggle out of it. He even breathed a sigh of relief. Well, since you know and understand everything, that's even better. I love her, you know. She is so passionate and stubborn in bed, like a lioness, for God's sake. And she gave birth right away from me. She makes me feel like a real man. After these words, her husband turned around and began to pack his things, and Kathy sat there, silent as if frozen, staring at one point. It wasn't until the door closed behind him for good that she burst out. She wasn't just crying, she was roaring like a beluga. A terrible depression set in. Kathy felt defective. What kind of woman was she if she couldn't give birth? Some girl could do it, and she couldn't after all these years. Who needed her anyway? The realization that she was now sure to spend her life alone made her cry even harder. The woman even took 3 days off and lay on the bed, sobbing and in pajamas, against the wall, mourning the ruins of family life. She was saved by her neighbor, Uncle Tony. When he learned that Kathy had separated from her husband, he decided to help her through the crisis in his own way. Kathy hadn't eaten in 24 hours, and she looked like a monster swollen with tears when the doorbell rang. The woman reluctantly went to open the door. To her surprise, on the threshold, instead of uninvited guests, sat and shook a cute little kitten. ashy beautiful color. It looked at her trustingly with its bottomless blue eyes and meowed pitifully. Kathy had not planned to have an animal, but her heart wavered and she took the baby in her arms. It immediately calmed down and clattered like a tractor. The woman began to stroke it. "What kind of miracle is that? Where did you come from? What am I supposed to do with you now? What should I do with you?" The neighbor, Uncle Tony, came out at the noise, and when he saw the woman with the kitten in her arms, he exclaimed, "Oh, it's beautiful. Is he yours? He's so cute. He's got buttons in his eyes." Kathy sighed. "No, someone rang the doorbell. I came out, and there's this miracle sitting on the mat, crying. Clearly, he was dropped off. Now what to do with it? What to do? Maybe take himself." The man waved his hands. No, I have a poodle, Kev. They won't get along. Keep it, Kathy. You don't have to take the cat out in the morning. He'll be waiting for you from work, making you laugh. What's the expense with him? A bowl of food and a litter box. What do you call it?" The woman took another look at the foundling and pronounced, "All right, let it be. It's a boy. I'll call him Sweetie." "I feel sorry for him. It's freezing outside. How can you kick him out?" Tony said goodbye, closed the apartment door, and rubbed his hands together happily. His plan had worked. In fact, he had brought the kitten on purpose. A friend of his had given it away. The man knew by experience, as an animal helps to cope with grief and depression, more than any antidepressants. This sweet neighbor was just humanly sympathetic to him, and he decided to just help her. Kathy took the kitten into the apartment, first poured warm milk into a saucer, then put a soft cloth in the box, making some kind of a bed. The baby was fed, and then he mockingly plopped down on his butt and began to lick himself, and then climbed up on her lap and began to rub her faithfully with his muzzle, nestling in her palm and purring. Something warmed the heart, and Kathy again wanted to live. I had to run to the pet store and buy food, litter box, flea drops, and everything else Sweetie needed. From that day on, the woman's life became somewhat better. She hurried home, and there her favorite pet was always waiting for her at the door, jumping into her arms and, as if hugging her, joyfully greeting her. The kitten trustingly snuggled up to the mistress at night, and her heart felt a little better. After that visit with Ben, Kathy couldn't get the conversation about the healer out of her head. What if it was Tim? What if it was Tim? Maybe an ability had opened up. Wouldn't it be great to meet him? So she decided to visit the healer this weekend and find out for herself. That's what Kathy did. It was a long drive, 2 hours by bus, then another hour on foot. At the very edge of the village, there was the same house. It was so well-groomed and beautiful, like a toy. I saw carved shutters on the windows, roosters on the roof, and strange birds made of wood. You will rarely see such things nowadays. Smoke was coming from the chimney, and there was light in the windows, which meant that the owner was surely at home. She had not driven all this way for nothing. Kathy's mind was a mess. What was he like now? I wondered. And if he was married? Surely he had children too. Living with his family, happy, and here she is. What should I tell him? Should he turn around and leave before it's too late? The woman knocked on the window with a sinking heart. A dog barked in the yard. An old man with a white, balding beard came to the doorstep. Kathy was taken aback. It wasn't Tim, that's for sure. Oh dear, what am I supposed to ask him now? What a silly situation. While she was pondering what to say and how to start the conversation, and blushing, the older man smiled at her in a friendly way and said, "Hello, beautiful. Come in, you'll be a guest." And he led her firmly into the house. Kathy had no choice but to follow him. The room was warm, clean, and smelled of dried herbs. The old man leisurely began himself. "Well, let's get acquainted. My name is Sam. What's your name? Tell me what brings you here. What's troubling you?" "Anything I can do to help. I don't say no to anyone." The woman exhaled. "My name is Kathy. My husband left me recently. I'm infertile, so I came. Maybe you can help me. I really want to have a baby." The old man took her hand in his and closed his eyes. His huge, slightly rough hand gave off an intense warmth. He was silent for a moment, then he answered, Who told you were barren? It's all nonsense. You will have children, a son and a daughter, remember. I'll give you one potion. You'll drink it at night, half a glass, exactly 1 month. And then we'll see. But that's not the only reason you came, is it? I can see that something else is eating you up. Kathy made up her mind. Sam, here's the thing. I work as a paramedic, and I was on a call recently, and I watched a little boy. So I gave him a couple of riddles. Not just any riddles, but the kind that only I and a childhood friend knew. I was sure he wouldn't guess it. And then his grandmother got the answer right. And she also said that you were the one who gave them to her when she was at your reception. Here, listen to this. You can't hold her in your hands, even if you clench your fist. She won't look back. There won't even be a trace of her. How do you know these riddles? It's very important to me. The healer laughed. That's what it's all about. A man keeps asking me these riddles, so I remembered a few. Tim is a former businessman who came to me 6 months ago. He was in a wheelchair after an accident. Of course, I help a lot of people, but I'm no magician. Tim needs an operation. He can't get back on his feet by himself. Herbs alone won't help. What's more, his wife, a viper under the skin, robbed him of his money, won't let him see his son, sold his apartment behind his back for fraudulent purposes, and embezzled all the money. So he had nowhere to live, wandering about, poor guy. So I took pity on him and gave him shelter in my outhouse. He's a handyman, doesn't drink, doesn't do nothing. He set up a workshop in my barn. He does wood carving. He decorated my whole house. The villagers saw it, and they also came to me with orders. I teach him little by little. He helps me to make decoctions, tinctures of herbs. And he is very sociable. He likes riddles and charades to puzzle. Kathy cried and begged. Please take me to him. It's definitely him, Tim. My most faithful friend. My first love. I can't wait to see him. The healer agreed. So what's the big deal? Get dressed. Let's go. He's always home. You can't do much with a stroller in the winter. The woman followed the healer into the backyard on stiff legs. There was a neat little outhouse. They knocked. The healer shouted, Tim, open up. You've got company. A little while later, the door opened, and an unshaven, thin man appeared on the threshold in a wheelchair. He looked at the healer in surprise, and then he looked at Kathy, and suddenly his faded eyes glowed and moistened. He stretched out his arms toward her and cried out, Kathy? Kathy, oh my God, oh my darling, how are you here? How did you find me? Come here, I'll hug you. How happy I am to see you. The woman couldn't stand it, burst into tears, and threw herself into his arms. She stroked his head and back and whispered, Tim is mine. We meet again. I found you after all. Believe it or not, your riddles helped. They showed me the way. My poor, unfortunate one. How did you do it? The healer realized that he was obviously superfluous here now, and went quietly into his house, while Kathy and Tim sat down in the tiny kitchen and began to talk. Tim said, Oh, Kathy, I've been through a lot in my life. You promised you'd wait for me when I got out of the army, but you never did. I came home and they told me that your Kathy had gone to town a long time ago. She found a fiancé there. So I went away too, went into business, set up a small furniture factory. Business was going great. I got married. Adriana was coming on to me anyway. She was beautiful and had lush forms, so I gave in, even though I did not like her much. We had a son, and then that awful accident happened. They assembled me literally piece by piece. I had to spend many months in hospital. At first, Adriana came to see me often, but then less and less often. Sometimes she brought papers for me to sign from work, and I felt so bad. I signed everything without looking. I trusted her, didn't I? After all, if not my wife, then who? When the doctors realized that they were powerless, they began to send me home. I called my wife. The subscriber was not available, and my mother-in-law's number was also silent. I barely got through to my neighbor, and he told me the terrible news. It turns out that my wife sold the apartment, and I signed the documents myself, without looking, took the child and left in an unknown direction. And she even sold my factory to her competitors for a lot of money. That's how I ended up as a useless invalid bum. I was sent to a boarding school, but I didn't make it there for long. It was such a scary place. No one really cares about people there. So I left, started wandering and drinking. I didn't want to live at all. And then a vagabond told me about this healer. You wouldn't believe it, I drove 50 kilometers in a wheelchair to see him. It seemed to me, here it is, my last hope. Sam took me in, but disappointed me that he could relieve pain, but cure. Alas, no. Another surgery was needed. I remember sobbing in his yard and shouted in my heart, "Fuck it all. I'll go to the river and drown myself. I'd rather die than wander around like a homeless dog again, begging for alms for a piece of bread. It's so humiliating. No one cares about me anyway." And you know what he told me? God works in mysterious ways. You didn't give life, you can't take it away. I'll help you, I'll put you up in the outhouse. Just don't drink and be disorderly. I don't like that. I don't mind a piece of bread and a bowl of soup. We're all human beings and sorrow can happen to anyone. Pray and ask the Lord for help. He will hear you for sure. That's how I stayed here. I set up a workshop in the barn, so I carve wood. Everything is better than in a nursing home. People here in the village are kind, sympathetic. Who will bring milk for a small handicraft made of wood? Who will bring vegetables from the garden, and so I live. Sam teaches me to make decoctions and tinctures. Quite an interesting case. I even like it. Every day I prayed under the images, asking God to have mercy on me. And he did hear me since you are here. My biggest dream is to find my son. I used to rock him. I used to get up at night. I remember his nose and cheeks smelling of milk. I can't accept that I have lost my son forever. Kathy cried, held Tim's hand, and listened to his sad story, thinking to herself, my God, the man has such grief, and I'm complaining about my fate. They talked for a long time. She told him about herself, how her husband had betrayed her and lived on 2 families, how she was barren, and how she had picked up a kitten. Something unimaginable was going on in both their hearts. Old feelings flared up with renewed vigor. Kathy and Tim could not look at each other, could not talk enough. They didn't want to open their hands at all. It was getting dark fast outside, and Kathy had to go. She kissed Tim goodbye and said, I'll help you. Do you hear me? You are the dearest person in my life. I won't leave you, I won't betray you, and I won't leave you alone. I'll try to help you find your son. You write me the address where you can find your wife or her relatives, and I'll try to find out something. Tim put his arm around the woman. Thank you. I'll write you the address of my former mother-in-law. Maybe she knows something about Adriana or her grandson. I'll be waiting for you now, and I'm very happy we met. I wish I could never part with you at all. I'll be waiting for you. Kathy cried again. I don't want to go either, my good man, but I have to. I have to go to work tomorrow, and Sweetie is there alone, hungry. I'll figure it out, and I'll be sure to come see you next weekend. They said a warm goodbye, and Sam led Kathy to the bus. At parting, he said, You did well to come. It was fate itself that brought you here. Tim was very happy. I saw it in his eyes. They came alive. They lit up. I've never seen him like that. You are always welcome. Kathy lay awake all night, tossing and turning, remembering Tim's eyes and hands, and realizing for sure that she would break into a pile, but she would help him. There was some special, invisible, but very strong bond between them. A mixture of friendship, trembling first love, and the best memories. After another shift, Kathy decided to go to the address Tim had given her. She unfolded the note and gasped. 37 Rose Street, apartment 21, Ben the son, and Maria, the mother-in-law. So this was the apartment where she had gone recently, and where it had actually started. What a coincidence. The woman went there with a pounding heart. She kept thinking, how do I start a conversation, and what do I say? Who was she to pry into their family business? But remembering Tim's sad eyes, she decided to take a chance and try to figure it out. She was discovered by Ben himself and immediately jumped for joy. Hello, Auntie. Are you visiting us? That's great. You're not going to give me the injection anymore. I'm cured now. The woman smiled and patted the baby's wiggly head. Hello, Ben. Is your grandmother, Maria, home? I'd like to talk to her. Will you let me in? I promise, no shots. Wait a minute. Here, this is for you. The woman got ready and bought the little boy some sweets and a little robot on the way. The child was incredibly happy, thanked him, and ran to print out the gifts. Maria shuffled into the kitchen and was quite surprised. Good afternoon. I remember you, Kathy. You came in the ambulance. Decided to listen to Ben again. He seems to have recovered a long time ago. He's fine. But if you need to, of course, I don't mind. Kathy sighed and began a difficult conversation. Maria, I met a man yesterday. His name is Tim. So he gave me your address, and he claims that you are his ex-mother-in-law, and your daughter is his ex-wife Adriana, who left him alone, so Ben must be his son. Tim, does that name mean anything to you? The elderly woman went pale and even staggered. Kathy was frightened and sat her down in her chair. The elderly woman began to talk. I have a daughter. Her name is really Adriana. You know, it's a long-standing pain of mine, a bleeding wound. My daughter grew up so smart, so bright, she did well in school. She is a latecomer in my family. I must have spoiled her too much, but I indulged her every whim. And when she turned 17, she was like a different girl. It's like a demon got into her. She was partying till nighttime, dancing, discos, endless suitors. How many times I fought with her, tried to get through to her, all to no avail. And then my daughter finished school and left for the city. She never showed her face at home, calling only to chirp that everything was good. She was studying for her degree in economics and was working part-time. She only came a couple of times, and then for a short time, she became some kind of stranger. I asked her where she got the money from, and she asks me. I found a rich boyfriend. He's a businessman. I'm getting married soon. I'm going to get my nose in everybody's grill. Then she called again, said that she was married, happy, everything is great. I was so offended, she didn't even invite her own mother to the wedding. How could that be? She didn't even introduce me to her husband, as if I was a stranger to them. And then suddenly a couple of years later, she came home with her son and a suitcase. I was shocked because I had no idea that I had a grandson growing up. Adriana was crying about her divorce. Her husband was walking left and right. And it turned out that she hadn't studied at all that time. And she lied to me. My daughter brought a lot of money. I wondered where from. But she told me that in the divorce they sold the apartment and divided the money equally. Well, I scolded her for order and stopped, accepting, of course. Then I immediately attached to such a nice and quiet baby. We talked a lot with my daughter. She promised me. She swore that that was it. That binge life was in the past. She was a mother, and she would take care of herself. I suggested it 100 times. Adriana, don't just sit around, go to work. The money will run out quickly, and you need to arrange their lives. And I'll look after Ben. You're young. But the daughter only snorted. What else? I was born to love, not to work. What will I be hired as? A waitress or a cleaner? And what? To slave for my uncle for a pittance? What will I look like? No way. I better find myself a better husband, and a richer one, and then my life will be better. And again, everything went in a circle. She was in love with my son, but she couldn't take care of him for long. She would buy him presents, kiss him, sit for an hour, and then go off somewhere again. And a year ago, she disappeared altogether. I cried my eyes out. My grandson was waiting for his mother too. I filed a police report, but so far no results. I don't know what to do. And I can't tell you anything about Ben's father. My daughter never bothered to introduce me to him, not before the wedding or after. I have to lie to my grandson that he's dead. I'll tell you what, I'll show you a picture of her. Maybe the man you're talking about will recognize her. The old lady went into the bedroom with a sigh and brought out the framed picture. Kathy just looked at it, and she was hysterical. Tears came down like a hailstorm. Her head was in shambles. Maria, terrified, started her on valocordine drops, wailing. What happened to you? Kathy, you look like you've seen a ghost. Do you know my daughter? Or maybe you know where to find her? Come on, don't keep me in suspense. You're gonna make me sick too. Kathy tried to pull herself together and somehow got it out. Pose that next to your daughter in the picture. She didn't tell you, did she? The old woman sighed. Another suitor. My daughter brought this picture almost the day she disappeared and left it on the table, as if it were a keepsake. Kathy could barely squeeze it out of her. What I'm about to say will seem unbelievable. And such a coincidence happens probably once in a million. But my ex-husband is in the picture, and your Adriana means his young mistress. They have a child too. I saw them driving the stroller down the street myself. Maria grabbed her heart and drank all the Velocordine she had prepared for the doctor. She waved her hands. How's the baby? Another one. My God, when did she do that? It's only been a year. And Ben. What about me? What about us? So she's living with another man, raising another child. Well, I'm looking for her, and the eldest son is waiting for his mother. How is that possible? It makes me sick. Kathy, I don't believe it. Let's find out for sure. My daughter couldn't have done this. Wait a minute. What about Father Ben? What about him? Where is he? Kathy sighed. He's an invalid, a wheelchair user. The tragedy happened to him 4 years ago. That's when your daughter abandoned him, ran away with her son and the money, and left him without a place to live and a business. That's the way it is. I understand you are very uncomfortable hearing all this and learning such shocking details about your daughter. It's no less of a shock to me, believe me. Bye, we'll figure it all out. While my head is spinning. But if this is all true, I really hope the father met his son. That's Tim's biggest dream. And Ben, I think he'll be glad he did. Don't you think the boy would like to have both a daddy and a mommy? Maria even took offense and replied sternly, I don't believe it, period. It's about time, Kathy, and I won't give my grandson to anyone, just so you know. We don't know if that man is the father or not. Goodbye. The woman began to walk away. Little Ben ran up to her. Are you leaving already? What about the riddles? I wanted to show you my drawings. Kathy hugged the boy. I've got to go, baby, but I'll definitely come back to you, and we'll play riddles. All right, I'll tell you one as a goodbye. We wash our hands every time before dinner. The only one who came to us unwashed was a fidget. He doesn't even want to listen to this conversation. He says I'll wash my paws, but in the afternoon. Ben immediately responded cheerfully. It's a kitty cat, isn't it? Am I right? Great, I want more. But then a disgruntled Maria intervened and said sternly, Ben, Kathy is in a big hurry and you're holding her up. Say goodbye. Go to your room. Don't disturb the adults. Kathy tried to smooth things over. Why are you doing this, Maria? It has nothing to do with the child. I'm not going to take your grandson away from you. I just want him to see his father. What's wrong with that? The old woman frowned even more. If you can prove that he is the father, then I'll allow it, but I won't give the child to some unknown person. That's all I said. Goodbye. Kathy barely made it through the weekend and rushed to Tim's house with the news. He had prepared carefully for the meeting, made a salad and as best he could, cleaned and shaved and dressed up. The woman hugged him warmly and began to tell him everything. I have great news. I found out everything you asked for. The man almost screamed. Did you find my son? What is he like? Tell me. I haven't seen him for so long. I remember him as a baby. How does he live? With Adriana? Kathy shook her head. No, he lives with his grandmother. And Adriana disappeared a year ago. Maria had even filed a missing persons report. And then she showed me a picture of her with her new boyfriend. And I felt bad. That's my ex-husband. Can you even believe that? Your ex-wife and my ex-husband are lovers. They have a child together. I saw them with the stroller the night before the divorce. I can't get my head around this. Tim only wondered. Wow, I thought there were no such coincidences. The woman sadly stated. As you can see, it happens. And Ben is wonderful. You know, I've only seen him twice in my life. But I'm attached to him as if he were my own. He's a sociable, smiling, blue-eyed boy. It's hard for him without his parents. His grandmother loves him, I can see that, but she's too old, she can barely walk with a cane. Tim banged on the rail of the wheelchair in his heart. Damn that chair. I hate it and my helpless body. My own son suffers, and I can't do anything. And does he need an invalid father? What will I give him in life? But how I want to hug him, to cuddle him, to tell him how much I love him, that I have remembered him all these years and have never forgotten him for a minute. Kathy only sighed heavily. I checked with the lawyers. It's not going to be easy to get your son back in court. But that doesn't mean it's impossible, does it? Isn't it? First, you have to convince Maria herself that you are Ben's real father. She's never seen her son-in-law. She's well aware of her daughter's frivolous and dissolute lifestyle, even though she loves her. She said she wouldn't give her son to just anyone. Second, Adriana's parental rights must be terminated. And to do that, we have to find her first. Let's try to do that by using my ex-husband. And thirdly, and most importantly, how do you explain all this to Ben? Why did my mom run off to someone else's uncle, and the other little kid loves him, and he doesn't? Why didn't Daddy look for him for so many years? Agree, Tim, there's a lot of blame to go around. If he had wanted to, he would have found his son long ago. So it's up to you to answer. Tim put his head down. You're right, Kathy, as always. That's what I've liked about you since childhood. You tell it like it is. Sometimes it comes out a little rude and even hurtful, but honest. Now you so dashingly laid it all out, and I suddenly realized that all these years I had been feeling sorry for myself. I've been reveling in my own helplessness. And I didn't think about my son, or rather I thought about him. But I didn't do anything. At least his mother-in-law spared his grandson, or with such a good-for-nothing mother Ben could have ended up in an orphanage. But on the other hand, if we succeeded, and I will sue my son, and his grandmother will give him to me, where would I bring him to live? How am I supposed to cope with a 6-year-old? If I can barely cope with myself? And most importantly, with what money will I raise him? Kathy responded eagerly. First of all, it's not me, it's us. Do you understand? I'm so happy we met, and I'm not going to part with you anymore. I'm the paramedic after all, and my salary's not bad. We'll get by. Then Sam, who had been silent until then, entered the conversation. Don't worry about where to live, Tim. We'll all live in my house. It's solid oak. It'll last 100 years. There's plenty of room for everyone. There's plenty of room for the little one here, the woods and the river nearby. So it'll be a pleasure for me to take care of my grandson. God didn't give me own children. I'm so used to you, Tim. I hate to part with you. And you too, Kathy, think about it. There's a school in the village and a first aid station. They'll be glad to have a good doctor there, don't you doubt it. Our grandfather retired a long time ago. He can hardly walk anymore. I always dreamed of having a big family, but I lived alone like a beggar. Kathy smiled. Thank you, Sam, for the offer. But first, let's think. How can we get Wepsha back? My opinion is that we should have a genetic analysis and have an exact confirmation that he is Tim's son. This will come in handy in court and grandmother show, so that she did not doubt. And then I'll try to find Adriana through my ex, because they are together now, probably. Well, and it's worth finding a good lawyer to help competently. In the meantime, Tim, put your hair in a bag. I'll take it with me. The man grabbed Kathy's hands and squeezed them tightly. Thank you, honey, from the bottom of my heart. For finding me, for taking care of me. You're like an angel. You make me want to live. And you're the reason. Why? Do not think I will not sit idly by too. I will cut even more crafts, except that few people know about them. And in winter, you can't even go to the market in a wheelchair. And now I have to make money for my family, for my son. I believe we will meet him for sure. Kathy tapped herself on the forehead. That's right. You could put your handicrafts on the internet and advertise them everywhere. Now is the time. You can work from home. And that's exactly your option. Let's start now. Let's go to your studio and I'll take pictures. The woman gently embraced Tim. You were stupid, Tim. Thank you for that. After my divorce from Nick and his betrayal, I didn't want to live either. I thought, who needs me now? A childless aunt. And now that we have met, I feel that our feelings have not cooled down. They have not gone away with the years. On the contrary, they have become deeper and stronger. My life is now filled with meaning, dreams, and ideas. So you and I have everything ahead of us, you know that. We'll get our son back and build our family anew. What years we've had." The man cried with happiness, and it felt so good on his soul. Kathy, as promised, was eager to get to work. After work, she waited for Ben and his grandmother to return from the store, had a word with them, and discreetly removed a few hairs from the boy's shoulder. She gave it all to an expert. In the meantime, she went to the agency to a lawyer. It cost a lot of money, but the case turned around. Adriana was found quickly. She wasn't going anywhere. She was living happily ever after with Nick and raising a child with him. Ben was now an unnecessary burden on her, because Nick categorically refused to accept another man's son into the family. So the woman ran away from home, leaving her mother and Ben. It is hard to understand what drove her and how she could love one child and cut the other out of her life, but she wrote a waiver easily. She was deprived of her maternity rights without any problems. The court sided with the father, considering all the circumstances. The genetic expertise came in handy. Maria was also in court, and with a heavy heart she had to agree, understanding that she would no longer be able to raise her grandson on his feet. It was only after this that Kathy came back to Ben's house. She sat him down on her lap and said, "Ben, I have good news for you. Your daddy, his name is Tim, has been found. He never forgot about you. He just had an accident and was very sick. He is in a wheelchair now, but he loves you very much and is waiting for you. He lives out of town in the village. Would you like to meet him?" The boy jumped for joy. "Hooray! I knew it. Daddy's alive. Of course I do. When? Can I go now?" "It's okay if he's sick. I'll help him." "Grandma, can I go with Aunt Kathy to see Daddy?" "Oh, please. I've been dreaming about it, you know that." The old lady wiped away a tear and nodded. "Go ahead, if that's the case. There it is, all wrapped up. Go, Ben, get ready." The joyful boy immediately rushed to his room, and Maria sadly continued, "If my mother's grandson isn't needed, at least let his father raise him." "Oh, Kathy, my heart bleeds. How can it be? Adriana has gone completely mad. What a sin it is to deny one's blood. Is that what I taught her? I do not know how I will live without Ben. I know I'm old, I can hardly walk, and he'll probably be better off with his father, but it's like I'm cutting him alive. My soul hurts so much." Kathy almost sobbed herself, and suddenly she said, "You know what? Get yourselves together. We'll go together. You'll feel better, and at least you'll get to know your ex-son-in-law. Otherwise, you'll torture yourself with thoughts of where Ben is and what's wrong with him." Maria didn't need to be told twice, and with incredible agility for her age, she got ready to go. Tim had been shaking all morning because Kathy had called to say she was taking her son and his grandmother, Adriana's mother, to visit him. He and Sam set the table. The man shaved and dressed, and asked the old man to buy candy for the baby at the country store and a toy. The thoughts in his head ran into each other. What to tell his son? How to explain everything? Why hadn't he searched for so many years? Why did he give up? How embarrassing. At last the guests arrived in a cab. They entered the house. As soon as Tim saw his little blue-eyed, curly-haired Ben, he couldn't help himself and rushed toward him. "Son, Ben, my darling, come to Daddy. Oh my God, did it really happen, and I found you?" Ben, too, burst into tears and sat on his father's lap, hugging him tightly. He whispered, "Daddy, I knew I believed you were alive. That's what you are. Just don't leave me again, okay? I felt so bad without you and Mom." Kim stroked the boy's skinny shoulders and soothed him. "I promise I won't let you go anywhere else. Will you live here with me and visit your grandmother on weekends and vacations? Do you agree? I'll teach you how to make things, carve wood. I have my own workshop." The boy's eyes immediately lit up, and yet he asked, "I agree. If my grandmother will let me go, what about Mom? Will she live with us too? When will she be back?" There was silence in the room. None of the adults dared tell the child the awful truth about her mother's betrayal. Then Kathy exhaled and answered emphatically, "Ben, your mother has gone very far away and she won't be able to live here. It's hard to explain, baby, it happens in life. And I'm going to live with Daddy, and I'm going to live with you too. You don't mind, do you? We'll bake pies and solve riddles together. And I promise, no needles. We'll take my cat, Sweetie, and we'll play with him in a ball. He's so funny, you'll love him for sure." Ben clapped his hands. "All right then, you're good. I liked you right away. You're fun to be with. Grandma, will you let me live with Daddy and Kathy? I'd like that very much. I'll come and visit you, and you'll come and visit us." The old lady even shed a tear. "You have my permission, grandson. They're good people as long as you're happy with them." Now look at Tim and realize what a wonderful son-in-law I've got. Too bad my daughter didn't appreciate it. Kathy and Ben moved in with Sam and began to live as one big family. Somehow everything got going right away. The old man was genuinely happy that his house was now crowded and cheerful, and the baby chirped incessantly. Kathy and Tim's relationship became very close, and the disability was not a hindrance at all. The woman enjoyed every night. Tim was so gentle, so affectionate. He whispered such words of love to her. Thanks to Kathy's efforts, many people on the internet got to know about this talented craftsman from a remote village. And orders came in. Sam helped as well. Now they began to sell herbal remedies. So in 6 months they managed to raise a decent sum. Kathy has transferred to work in the village, and the apartment they shared with Nick has decided to sell, and the proceeds to add-on operation for Tim. Nick was not against it, and the deal went through. The woman counted all the money they had and happily reported it. That's it, my dears. Now we have enough for an operation for sure. Tomorrow we are looking for a clinic and a good professor. I will arrange everything. You will walk Tim. I believe it. Yes, Ben. Shall we put Daddy on his feet? The 3 of us can walk in the woods and look for mushrooms and berries. The man almost cried for joy. Kathy, sweetheart, you sold the roof over your head without a second thought and decided to spend all the money on my surgery. You're worthless. I am eternally indebted to you for everything. Thank you, darling. Can I really get back on my feet? I can't believe it. Kathy only laughed. You don't understand, Tim. Money is dust. Why do I need this apartment if I wasn't happy there for a minute? I got so much more with you. A home, a family, a son. Yes, yes, Ben. I love him as my own even more. So I have no regrets. I'm so happy with you. It's not the money. I know that now. The surgery was a success, and a couple of months later Tim was walking confidently with a cane by himself. Of course, he would never be able to run again, but it was an unreal achievement, something he had never even dreamed of. Together they worked hard, added a veranda and another room, expanded the vegetable garden, and life in the healer's house began with renewed vigor. Maria was also taken to live with him, so that she would not be lonely alone, and Sam treated her chronic ailments with remedies and herbs. The old woman was happy. She did not feel superfluous or a stranger here. On the contrary, everyone was only glad to see her. Nick and Adriana, on the other hand, didn't work out so well. They couldn't keep the family together. The woman quickly got bored of being a mommy again. The family routine pissed her off. There were so many handsome and young guys around, and she went back to her old ways, went on a binge, leaving Nick and her daughter, and then disappeared altogether. The man divorced her and began to live alone with his daughter. Only now did he realize how painful it was to be betrayed by those closest to him, and how much suffering he had caused Kathy. And when he found out that she was pregnant, he began to bite his teeth. So Kathy wasn't barren at all. And he humiliated her like that. And Kathy was the only one who loved him, tried to please him in everything, and was a model hostess. And he didn't notice or appreciate that at all. When Kathy found out she was pregnant, she cried and couldn't believe it. She took a test 3 times and was afraid of making a mistake. It was only when the ultrasound showed twins that she calmed down. Sam only rejoiced and chuckled in his mustache, saying, "And I told you that you would have children, a boy and a girl, and you kept saying, I'm barren." Kathy hugged the medicine man tightly. It was your herbs that helped. I took them for a long time, just like you told me to." He just waved it off. "You helped yourself, believed in yourself, and became happy, so it all worked out.